The time has come for a couple more chapters of Gold Rush Girl, and we are up to chapter 18. In the morning, I lay abed, listening to the soft, steady pattern of rain upon our tent. The sound reminded me that the weather was outside. I was within, dry and warm, a sweet and soothing feeling. I'd been so tired the night before that I'd fallen asleep in my clothing. A night of dancing followed by a day of hard rowing will cause fatigue. That led me to think with more pleasure about the day before. I recalled, too, that Mother must surely come soon, and Father was due back in a few days. They would, I hoped, be proud of me for having managed myself and Jacob so well. All of this put me in such good spirits that I called out, "Good morning," to Jacob, but received no reply. Belatedly, I remembered that when I returned late the night before, he was not in his bed. I lay there, choosing to believe his absence was his way of showing resentment for my spending the day with Thad. Moments later, I told myself surely by this time he would have come back. I decided he most likely was with Senor Rosales. I also considered the possibility that he had gone to Portsmouth Square to look for gold. The low angle of the sun, if there was a sun, sparkled lost grains. Mornings were the best time to look since drunken men stumbled about late at night. If I found Jacob there, I knew he'd tease me. He was working when I slept. That reminded me, I promised Mr. Lyle, the carpenter, that I would work with him that day. I drew out my money belt from under my bed, checked for my money and my knife, and fastened it around my waist and told myself that I needed to make sure Jacob was all right before I set off to work. I stuck my head out of our tent. It was still drizzling and too overcast to establish the time. Across the way, despite the inclement weather, the San Francisco Cafe restaurant was open for business, with a few customers waiting in line to be served. As always, Senor Rosales was at his stove cooking, smoke rising up through the tin chimney. "Buenos dias, Senor Rosales," I called as I walked over. It was clear right away that Jacob was not there. I told the senor what had happened to Thad and me, and when I got back, Jacob was gone. "Have you seen him?" "Lo siento. Sorry to hear what happened, Corderita," said Senor Rosales. "All I can tell you is your hermano, your brother, was worried about you." "He always worried," I said. "True, but this time más. To tell you my thoughts, senorita, I think él se siento solo. He was feeling lonely, more than usual. It's what I told your father. Not wise to leave him solo, alone." "I told Jacob he could come with us," I said, somewhat uncomfortable, aware that I had not truly encouraged him to come down to the bay. "Can I give you some breakfast?" Senor Rosales offered me a piece of beef, which I quickly ate. "I have to go to work," I announced. "If you see Jacob, por favor, senor, tell him I'm working with Mr. Lyle. Ask him to come to me." "Absolutamente, Corita." Sorry, I'm not good at Spanish at all. I took French. I stood before our tent, not sure what to do, work or find Jacob. A younger brother who hampers one's life is most irritating. All the same, I felt I should relocate him, tell him where I'll be, that we should have dinner together, my way of absolving myself for slighting him the day before. I hurried over to Portsmouth Square, but he was not on the grounds. I eyed the gambling places. Whenever I passed by the entranceways of Parker House and the El Dorado, I heard shouts, laughter, scream, and music. Often horrid fights broke out among the men. Once, when passing a saloon, I heard pistol shots. Quite frightened, I had watched as a dead man was borne away on an old door. Alas, such violence was common in this wild city. Though I much doubted Jacob had gone into either place, I told myself that if I was going to solve the aggravating puzzle of his whereabouts, I should make sure. I went into the El Dorado. Unlike the night of the dance, gambling and drinking were already going on. I was bumped, shoved, and generally stomped on by a crowd of tough, loudmouthed men and a few women. It didn't take long to determine that Jacob wasn't there. Then I did a quick check of the post office. He was not standing in line waiting for the mail. I made a return trip to our tent in hopes that he had come back. He had not. Nor had Senor Rosales caught sight of him. It was about then that I began to truly worry. It was absolutely not like Jacob to stay away for so long. The rain had lessened and the morning fog had thinned, enough so that I could go down, look at the bay and at Rotten Row. I saw the ship that Jacob had pointed out, the Yankee Sword. She was still there. Remembering our last conversation, I wondered, could he have, in fact, signed on? No, I refused to consider such a possibility. Jacob would never do something that would be so unusual for him. Seeing that new ships had arrived, I considered that he might be at the Cove Beach in hopes that Mother had arrived. Now that would be something he would do. Going downhill, I passed some frame houses being built on places which had just been mud a couple of days ago. I even passed Mr. Lyle, the carpenter, who I had promised to help. "Hey, Miss Torrey," he called out. "You're late." "I need to find Jacob," I called back. "Have you seen him?" "Nope, but I could use his help too." "Soon as I find him, I'll come," I said, and gave a wave and continued on. At the Cove Beach, lighters were hauling in throngs of newcomers in their baggage. Other boats were bringing men back from the diggings. The contrast was extreme. Newcomers, happy with excitement. Returning miners, emancipated, filthy, dispirited, shivering with malaria fevers. I suddenly felt a twinge of Jacob's apprehension. What if Father did not return? What if Father was ill or injured and had found no gold? These were all real possibilities. There was no sign of Jacob among the onlookers at the cove, nor, for that matter, of Mother. I did remind myself that I had an obligation to replace the oar I had broken the day before. Then it also occurred to me that perhaps Jacob, in search of me while I was looking for him, might have gone to see Thad. I hurried over to the store where Thad clerked. The Howard and Mellis store sold all kinds of dry goods that miners needed, from slouch house hats to shoes, picks, pans, and the things ships required. The store even posted ship arrival and departure times. As usual, it was crowded and it was almost comical to watch the faces of the newcomers when they were told the prices of the things that they desired. $50 for a pickaxe, $40 for a pound of coffee. I found Thad at the back of the store piling up Kansas trousers. "Morning," he called when he saw me. "I put aside a new order for that boat we used, $40, but I lost 25 at the tables this morning, so I'll owe you. Is Jacob back?" I was annoyed by his betting, but being more concerned about Jacob, I only replied to his question. "Not yet." "You ask Senor Rosales?" Yes, he said Jacob was looking for me. That, if he comes by, tell him I'll be working with Mr. Lyle, or to go back to the tent and wait. He'll show up. He fetched the new oar, which I signed for, and brought it back to the cove and left it in the boat we had borrowed. Then I sat in the boat, dejected and growing even more concerned. I tried to think about where I might look for Jacob. I needed to find him to settle myself. Near the building where Thad worked was the Mercury Saloon. The Mercury was one of those ships that had been left in Rotten Row. Somebody had purchased her and hauled her hulk over to the Yerba Buena Cove Flats. With pilings made from her masts, she was fixed against the new central wharf and turned into a building, a gambling saloon. For San Francisco, that was not unusual. Right across the way, another ship, the Euphemia, still afloat, was being turned into a new city jail. Other empty boats had become hotels, warehouses, and hospitals. One was becoming a church. As for the landlocked Mercury, her bow had been sawed off and squared. Over the entryway was a sloping roof where the name Mercury Saloon had been painted with large letters. Since the saloon was right on the cove shore, miners came directly from the diggings up the bay and began to gamble with their newfound gold. Some won, most lost, and did it quickly. As a result, the place was always full of a frenzy of hope and desperation as these men cast away what they had worked so hard to get. The Mercury fascinated many, including Thad. Jacob knew he liked going in. Hadn't Thad even gone in this morning? Jacob also knew that I had been there any number of times trying to get Thaddeus to leave. It occurred to me that perhaps Jacob went to the Mercury to look for us and that someone had seen him. But with the Mercury's reputation for being one of the worst saloons, you may be sure I liked it no more than the places of Portsmouth Square. I was reluctant to go inside. Stop making excuses, Tori, I told myself. You need to find your brother Jacob. I went in. Chapter 19. The Mercury was always swarming during the late afternoons and nights, but when I went in that morning, the crowd was sparse. Despite the early hour, the glass chandeliers were already lit. Huge wall-sized mirrors were polished. They were there to make everything bigger and brighter. Behind drinking counters were shelves set against the wall, displaying great numbers of liquor bottles, as well as glass jars full of free peppermints. The air smelled of whale oil fumes, which mingled with the odor of whiskey and stale tobacco. It made me wrinkle my nose. It was almost impossible to believe the place had been a ship, not unlike the Stephanie K, in which I had come to California on. Yet its transformation was so like San Francisco. There were multiple roulette and billiards tables, as well as a gambling table covered with green cloth, behind which, though it was just morning, sat professional gamblers. Around these men were stacks of coins and piles of gold dust, worth, Thad had told me, as much as $5,000. The money was there to tempt the miners to try their luck at these games of chance. During crowded times, enthusiastic men would line up 3-4 deep, shoving forward so that they could place bets. There were just as many stumbling the other way who, having become abruptly impoverished, had faces that were maps of misery. If I had learned anything about San Francisco, it was this. The men might have been in a fever to get gold, but they were just as feverish as to wager it away. As I stood in the middle of the long hall, the ship's hull, and observed the entire sparkly place, I saw no sign of Jacob. But I did notice that on a stage in the back, where a musician performs, a solitary Negro boy was sitting on a chair, playing a brass-keyed bugle. The melody was that sad, I often think of writing a home, which I recognized as the one that Jacob had been whistling. Willing to make any connection to my brother, I wandered back to the stage. I thought the bugler, somewhat the same age as I, skinny like me, with coffee-colored skin and bushy curly hair. He wore frayed trousers and a flannel shirt, somewhat large for him, the cuffs rolled back over his thin wrists, boots, and though his face was narrow, his cheeks, as he played, bulged like chicken eggs. His fingers were long and slender and moved with great assurance over the keys, bringing forth the song with a smooth, melancholy tone. As I stood there dressed for work, which is to say, not in my feminine attire, looking and listening to him play, I was sure he noticed me, but he didn't do or say anything. "Good morning," I finally called. The boy, without stopping his playing, glanced over to me and gave no more than a bob of his instrument to acknowledge my presence. It was only when I continued to stand there that he abruptly stopped playing, lowered his bugle, and considered me with angry eyes, as if to say I was interrupting him. Though I suspected he wished I go away, I chose to take advantage of his pause as a chance to say something. "Do you play in the band?" I asked. He lifted his horn as if to say that was obvious. "The tune you were playing, I often think of writing home. My brother likes it." His face softened a little. "Okay," he said without emotion. "My name is Victoria Blaisdell. Tori." After a moment, he gave a nod. "Samuel Nichols. Sam." "What part of the States are you from?" I asked. In San Francisco, when you met people, that was the way a friendly conversation almost always started. He hesitated before saying, "New York State. You?" "Rhode Island," I said, pleased that the Yankee connection gave us something in common. "Were you playing here last night?" His look grew wary. What if I was? "It's my younger brother," I said, "Jacob. He's gone off somewhere. I don't know where, so I'm searching for him. Since he liked music and that song you were playing was his favorite song, I thought he might have been here last night. And maybe you saw him?" "A lot of people here last night. What does he look like?" I described Jacob. The boy was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Last night, a kid like that was standing right where you are, watching me and listening to me play that tune. When I stopped, he went off." Here at last was some news. Do you have any idea where? I asked with eagerness. Sam shook his head. All I do is make music. As if to make his point, he turned away from me, lifted his bugle, and began to play the melody again. I often think of writing home. I took this to mean that he was not going to say anything more. Though frustrated, I said, thank you, and turned away, uncertain where I should go next. All I could think to do was go back up the hill and wait. I had almost reached the Mercury's front door when a man stepped in front of me, blocking my way. With his high stovetop hat, he loomed over me. He was a tall man, his face shaped like the letter V, with a trimmed dark beard, elegant jacket, and a black cravat and a white collar. His long nose brought to mind a blackbird or a crow. I took him to be one of the professional gamblers. Yes, miss, what brings you here? He demanded, as if he had the right to know. Though I thought him ill-mannered, at least he recognized me as a girl. Yes, sir, I said. I was looking for my brother. That a fact. What does he look like? I described him. A kid? 10, I said. He frowned. Little young to be here, isn't he? But nope, can't say I ever saw him. What makes you think he was here? That boy, I pointed to the back of the saloon at Sam. The bugler. He told me he saw him. The man glanced toward the stage. Then he turned back to me with unfriendly eyes and said, I was here all last night, and I didn't see anybody like you described. Now, can you trust me, or are you going to trust the colored kid? Hate to tell you, he's not one for speaking the truth much. Anyway, I don't think a girl should be in here. You better move out. Not only were his words offensive, but the way he spoke and studied me was intimidating. I almost blurted out what I thought. I'd trust that boy before you, but decided I'd best leave. In any case, the man, whoever he was, had told me to go. Thank you, sir, I managed to say. The man stepped aside and allowed me to move toward the entrance. I had no idea who he was, but as I walked away, I belatedly realized that he had a pelican feather attached to his jacket lapel. It was just like the one Father gave Jacob. Whoa, and that's the end of the chapter. So we're up to chapter 20. All right, come back for more.